Hi everyone and welcome back to the channel. So I recently built a 6x4 plastic shed for my garden to store my things in, and now I need to build some racking or heavy duty shelving. So I've got some scrap wood here, some 2x3s of all different lengths, and they've all been used before, so they're full of holes and all different lengths. And for the shelves themselves I'm going to use this 10mm thick plywood melamine, which is used in kitchens, and I found this thrown out. Luckily I could just about fit it in the car. So now I'm going to measure up these longer pieces. These are going to make the 4 supports for the shelves. So once I'd cut one, I used that as a template to cut the next one. I didn't use a stock block just because these were so long. So now I needed to give them a good sanding down because they had a lot, as I say, of holes in them from nails that I'd ripped out. So for that I'm just using an 80 grit sandpaper. Then I gave them a coat of grey fence stain. And in the end it needed about 3 coats to finish it off. Not necessary, but I thought it'd look better. So before I continued, I just filled in a lot of these nail holes because there's a lot of them. It looked quite messy. I was going to leave it originally, but I had some filler, so I just went ahead and filled them. And then once that was dry, I just sanded it down the filler by hand. So then I just finished painting them. So now I needed to measure up the 2x3s to make the shelving. So I'm going to have 3 shelves in total. So now I'm cutting the longer sections, the width sections. And again I'm using the pieces as a template to cut the next piece. So now I'm cutting the sections for the depths of the shelves. So the dimensions for this shelf was customised to my shed. So I just measured the shed itself and then worked out what would be a good kind of size. So there's one of the shelves made up already, and there's some of the leftover pieces. So how I assemble the shelf, I use an offcut of 2x3, and I'm using an engineering square to make sure that it's all square, and I'm going to use one of these large wood screws in each side, and then the uprights will sit inside where you can see that offcut, and that will allow me to get screws in from both angles, but you'll see that later on. So for now I'm just going to drive a screw in each end. You could use this design for a garage or workshop. I'm sure it's going to hold plenty of weight. So now I thought I'd give the shelving a paint as well, just to match. So now I needed to make the shelves themselves, and as I say, I've got this piece of 10mm thick laminated plywood, which is really strong, ideal for this application. So I'm using a piece of laminate floorboard, and that is for a straight edge. So I'm just going to clamp that up when I've measured it and mark with a pencil. So I'm just going to cut off that rough piece at the end to start with the circular saw. If you'd like to see how I built the plastic shed, I'll leave a link in the description box below for that. So now I'm cutting the first shelf section, and these shelves will fit inside and on top of those frameworks that I've just made. So now, once they were made, I wanted to give them a round over, mainly just to stop the edges of the shelf chipping. So I used the palm router just to round over the edges. And you can see that gave quite a nice finish. I then just gave these tops a sanding down. I would have used the white side, but it had quite a few holes in it and scratches, so I used this grey side. So it's laminated on both sides. And then I went over it all with some linseed oil, just to give it a better finish and just to protect it in the long term. So I'm not using any glue for the structure of this shelving, and that's just in case in the future I want to move it, for example if I move house. So now I'm just giving it a buffing off and removing all the excess oil. So now to attach the shelves, I'm going to use these screws, nice long screws, and they've got like a cutting bit in the end, so they don't need any holes drilling beforehand, and they go all the way through almost to the other side, so they'll give maximum support. So at the bottom I want there to be a bit of a foot on the first shelf, so again I'm using an offcut of 2x3 and just using the engineering square to make sure that it's all level and square. And then I'm going to begin to drive in these screws. So on one side I'm going to use one screw in the center, and that's going to go straight into the upright. And then on the other side I'm going to use two screws on either side to avoid the first screw. So each corner will be fixed with 3 screws. So no countersinking for these screws, and they have like a bugle shaped head as well, so they go into the wood quite nicely. So that was the bottom section on, and you can see how it's going to look. So for the central section I've used a piece of an offcut of pallet wood, and I've just clamped it up, and that is just as a guide to secure each corner to make sure it's the same height. So the bottom shelf is quite deep, and that will allow me to put lots of paint on there and pile things up. So now I'm just checking to see that these shelves fit okay before I continue, and they're a very good fit. So for the top section, I'm using a scrap of the plywood just to make sure that it's flush with the top of the uprights. Again, using the engineering square and just knocking it into position. Once I've got the position, I'm just going to clamp it up. And drive in some screws. So to fix these shelves in position, I've got these little brackets and small screws. And I'm just going to put one bracket either side, flush with the frame. And I'm just going to countersink and drill those small screws in. Again, checking with the engineering square, I found it really useful on this project. I used it many times. So now I'm going to add these shelves on. It's quite satisfying to use up some of this rough material on this build, because if you have a look online, if you want to buy freestanding heavy duty racking, it's very expensive, and the cost of this project was almost nothing. All reused materials apart from the brackets and the screws. So now I'm just tightening by hand, and I made sure that the screws weren't too long and they didn't go through the tops. And that worked well. So now it's just time to get this racking into the shed. So later on I will organise what I'm going to put on this racking. For now I just got a few things on. I was very pleased with the way it turned out. If you found this video useful, please leave me a like and also comment, and also consider subscribing for more videos. And as always, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.